Racial segregation. Even though Amendment 14 was given to African Americans, giving them full citizenship, violence raged on as lynchings, arson, and rape took place against the black community. White supremacists refused to let blacks live safely in public and went through great lengths to achieve racial segregation. In 1890, the Louisiana General Assembly passed a law that would prevent blacks and whites from riding together on trains. And in 1896, the U.S. Supreme Court reported that public facilities for whites and blacks are to be separate but equal. This segregated the South even further. There were many influential African American civil rights activists. However, this video can only capture the moments of a few great men and women and the different ways they tackled discrimination, segregation, and civil rights. Ida Bell Wells was more than a journalist and feminist. She was an abolitionist that led an anti-lynching crusade in the 1890s. After her friends were killed by a lynch mob, Wells was determined to spread the word, even if it put her own life at risk. She eventually took her writings to T. Thomas Fortune, a former slave who owned a newspaper called the New York Age. Additionally, Wells published a pamphlet, The Reason Why the Colored American is Not in the World's Columbian Exposition, and a personal example of lynchings titled The Red Record. Wells used every writing outlet she could to fight against the oppression she witnessed and felt. Robert Lloyd Smith sought new ways to improve the education and the economy of the black community. Smith and his friend Booker T. Washington believed that blacks should focus on economic self-improvement and expressing cultural pride instead of social and political equality. In 1890, Smith established the Farmers' Home Improvement Society. He hoped to encourage African American workers to strive to reach fiscal independence by being taught to grow their own food, own their own farms cooperatively or individually, and to pay cash for their goods and services to avoid debt. However, Smith did not stop there. To further improve the educational and civil rights of African Americans, he served in the 24th and 25th Texas state legislatures. Smith climbed to the highest power he could to make a difference in his community, and he did. The Farmers' Home Improvement Society flourished for nearly 20 years after the Great Depression. After he was made bishop of the 7th District of the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, Walters decided to steer his attention to the civil rights struggle in 1898. He decided to form a partnership with T. Thomas Fortune and founded the National Afro-American Council, where he served as president. The council challenged the separate but equal Plessy v. Ferguson U.S. Supreme Court ruling in 1896 and other discriminatory legislations like it in hopes to make a difference. Later, Walters helped W.E.B. Du Bois establish the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP. From there, Walters became vice president of the organization. Walters could have sat on the side and watched his community battle civil rights for themselves, but decided to form organizations that would help African Americans for many years to come. By the time the 1950s and 60s rolled around, the fight for equality raged on, the civil rights movement was born, and so were many new activists who sought to do more than form organizations and publish articles. They believed it was time to fight back. Malcolm X was a well-known civil rights activist that had specific goals and strategies to overcoming discrimination. He believed in black separatism, which would provide blacks with a separate nation to advance and grow together, because he was convinced that white men could not provide the solution to equality. X once stated, "Brothers, white man can't give you the solution. They can't do it and won't do it." He eventually formed the Afro-American Unity, which was to bring 22 million non-Muslim African Americans with the black communities on the continent of Africa. X wanted to reconnect blacks to their African heritage, encourage them to have self-determination, and to form an economic independence. X also encouraged his followers to fight back with violence. He told them that if they did not defend themselves, they would continue to be at the mercy of a mob of ruthless and violent white supremacists. Rosa Parks quickly became known as the mother of the modern-day civil rights movement when she refused to give up her seat on a segregated bus in Montgomery, Alabama, to a white man who could not find a seat in his section. According to the city's bus ordinance, it did not give drivers the authority to force a paying passenger to give up their seat to anyone, regardless of color. However, Parks was eventually arrested and the fire within the black community ignited. On the night Parks was arrested, E.D. Nixon, the head of the local NAACP, began to organize the Montgomery bus boycott. Nixon spread the news through the local papers and handbills. On December 5, 1955, the day of Rosa's trial, African Americans would refuse to ride the buses to work or school. Instead, they would walk or take a cab. By the end of the 381 days, about 40,000 African American workers opted to walk to work, sometimes as far as 20 miles. Martin Luther King Jr. was called to be the spokesperson of the Montgomery bus boycott and minister at the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church because he had strong family connections, had professional standing, and was young and well-trained. During the Civil Rights Movement, King gave such powerful speeches that the churches would be filled. In his first speech, he stated, "We have no alternative but to protest. We have sometimes given our white brothers the feeling that we liked the way we were being treated, but we come here tonight to be saved from that patience that makes us patient, with anything less than freedom and justice." King also believed in nonviolent protests. Even when his house was bombed by segregationists with his family inside, he told his followers to stand down and not to fight back with violence. In King's most influential speech, "I Have a Dream," he called for an end to racism. He states, "I say to you today, my friends, even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream." King, Wells, Smith, X, Parks, and Walters all fought for one main goal: equal rights. However, Walters, Smith, and Wells fought behind the scenes, building organizations and publishing writings, whereas Parks, X, and King sought a different route. They spoke up against white supremacy, they fought for what they believed in, and they walked for 381 days until they achieved civil rights. However, for those who fought, economic growth during that time succeeded as well. Gavin Wright, an economic historian, found out that when the South took the lead towards integration, the path they chose improved the economy in sudden and lasting ways. He states, "Powerful historical examples where you show that history has a bite, that history mattered, that the outcome was not the inevitable result of some deep economic forces." In conclusion, the activists we talked about taught us a very important lesson. We all have the power to change the world. It's what we do with that power that matters most.
We are oppressed. We are exploited. We are downtrodden. We are denied not only civil rights, but even human rights. So the only way we're going to get some of this oppression and exploitation away from us or aside from us is come together against the common enemy.